He said, play your best when your best is needed, and it is needed now for the Boston Celtics. As we get into now the postseason of the NBA, the play-in part of the postseason begins tonight, and we've got some great games for you, including the Hornets and the Pacers. 6:30 p.m. is the tip-off on ESPN Radio, and then you have the Wizards and the Celtics at 9 o'clock, also ESPN Radio. As we know, the winner of Wizards-Celtics moves on to play the Nets. They get the 7th seed, so that's your prize.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
That's good.
The loser has to then play the winner of Hornets-Pacers to see if they can get the 8th seed. So how much do we give the Celtics? And, I mean, they're banged up. They've had a terrible finish to the season. They've got some issues going on with that team, motivation-wise, everything else. A lot of questions about that group. I mean, do you give them – they're the home team. Do you give them a fighting chance against a Wizards team that has been red-hot on fire with 2 stars heading into the postseason?
Speaking of fighting chance, before we dive into the NBA, this morning I had a fighting chance outside my door. I was telling y'all this morning.
Did not know you wanted to bring
Just
that
derailed
to the
conversation.
No, I just was thinking about it. It's funny. What time did you wake up?
Me?
Yeah.
4. I was in the city this year.
Yeah.
So you got into the city. Yeah, I was
already here.
I was
about
up 3.
2 a.m.
Okay.
Outside my window, a couple people were arguing for about an hour.
Ooh.
Just screaming straight New York stuff, man.
Just extra violent screaming.
Extra violent screaming.
Yeah.
Loud,
Yeah.
loud, just blowing the horn, laying on the horn. They got into a whole confrontation. Eventually, the police came, so it kind of squashed it a little bit.
And this is right outside the crib.
Man, like right outside my window.
That's the thing about New York, though. Somebody could be arguing, and you're like, man, like typically, like if you're in the suburbs, that's down the street, or like,
Man, like
this is
literally
right on
You're
your
on
block.
top
a
of
stone throws away from the front door.
But first of all, usually when there's screaming in the street, then it ends up being screaming out the window, and then it becomes everybody just yelling at each other.
Hey,
Is that what
pipe
you mean
it
by-
down!
Is that what you mean by straight New York stuff?
Man, just straight New York. It made me
So
think
in
of
L.A.,
it.
when somebody's arguing in the
You
street,
don't get that
it's
you don't get
quiet,
that.
polite. Is that how? Is that
They're
what
going
you
to stay
say?
inside their house.
People just
You know.
We're gonna argue inside our crib.
nobody argues in the street in L.A. No. We keep that stuff inside.
And then that means that we can argue about the NBA now.
Yeah, it means a lot of arguing inside.
About what the Lakers getting ready to do.
TD Garden. What's up, Boston?
He showed up this morning with a story. Couldn't wait to tell that experience, the New York experience. But the Boston experience is one, as we'll watch tonight and see what they're made of. We'll see what they've got. And again, no Jaylen Brown. He is out. He's injured. Can Jason Tatum carry them? Can Kemba Walker play through all the myriad injuries that he has? And then if they don't get out of this and they don't end up in a series, what happens in Boston? Is it time to make changes? Here's Woj talking about, and this is on the Woj and Lowe Playoff Preview podcast, talking about that maybe we should not overreact to whatever happens with the Celtics.
Their core is the right core. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Brad Stevens. You keep building off of those 3. And you can and Marcus Smart. And I include him because he's such an important player for them. But I think this is going to be the year to not make rash judgments off of this COVID season and all the issues that impacted teams, to be careful, to not go and do dramatic overhauls of whether it's leadership or your best players off of this weird thing everybody just went through.
What do we think of that? Now the core he's talking about is about 3 to 4 people.
But, it's so interesting because I go back to this last year when season ended.
You said it.
No, it's not even. I'm not taking credit for it. I don't want to take credit for it, but it's like you can see that this was going to eventually happen to Boston because if you rewind and go back 7 years, not even 2 or 3 years, 7 years, what were they doing? They were picks and this, and we're picking the right guys, and we're doing this. But they didn't cash in. Now you fast forward to where they are today. They're in the same position they were 7 years ago. They're in the same position.
All right,
they're in the same position. And I told Jay Will and I told Big Perk when they were on, I'm like, man, that door getting ready to slam on them.
The reality is that Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Brad Stevens, and Danny Ainge, they're going to get a pass this year. I mean, you go to the Eastern Conference Finals the last 3 out of 4 years. Jason Tatum has COVID. Jaylen Brown gets injured. Marcus Smart has dealt with injuries. You get Evan Fournier. Robert Williams is out. There's a lot of missing pieces. That's not the story to me because that's just what's happening, right? The story is that this team they don't have the desire that you want them to have. They lost their last 10 out of 15 games, okay? And the problem that I have with this team down the stretch, it doesn't look like there is leadership on the floor.
Right.
It doesn't look like they want to play together and they want to actually play hard. It's a bad look for Brad Stevens. I think coaching-wise, I think he's really good. I wonder how he influences and who takes that influence from the coach and translates it to the floor from the player perspective. And I say this, if it's Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Danny Ainge, and Brad Stevens, that's your core. That's your core. Everybody else, if you're not a piece of it,
but that's a dramatic change.
That is a dramatic change.
Keeping
yes.
those guys, and you make changes outside, which they need. First of all, they have not been
They
the
have
same.
to have change.
They have not been the same defense since Al Horford left. They have not. He was a huge part of their pick.
Gordon Hayward is thriving in Charlotte.
But that's all change anyway.
Kyrie's thriving in Brooklyn.
But that's all change. Every single year, they're changing. That's what I said. If you go back 7 years ago, and I understand they've been in the Eastern Conference Final, what was it, 3 out of the 4 years?
Yep.
But that's being in the same spot because you didn't get to the ultimate goal, which is a championship. You mentioned some names. You mentioned Al Horford. That's change. Gordon Hayward, that's change.
Yeah.
Kyrie, that's change.
Well, those were
bringing in Kemba Walker, that's change.
Yeah.
Let me call this Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, because look, the Celtics are one of the flagship franchises, and when they're good, like there's a lot of interest in them. And this is a hugely disappointing year for them. Being in a play-in, that doesn't make sense for a team. Now, Ainge, you could say, has collected a lot of assets in the draft and hasn't used all of them, but he did make one amazing move, which was flipping the number 1 pick and getting Tatum out of the deal. And you
don't get me started because that's Philly. I could lose my mind.
Yeah, you could argue that's one of the biggest moves that he's
made.
That was
Markelle Fultz.
Yeah, for Markelle Fultz.
Yes,
right.
exactly.
So you flip it, you get picks, and you get arguably the best player out of that draft.
Yeah, he's been able to do all of those sort of things, right? He was able to orchestrate the championship, big three, all of those. So he's been able to do a lot. Injuries are a part of it, as you know, Jay.
Yep.
Injuries are a part of it. If COVID falls in line with the injury, that's part of it where we are today. But it's still no excuse for where you were at 7 years ago. You still are where you're now. I would argue that Philadelphia is ahead now where they were behind before.
That's a fair point. That's a fair
point.
And that's where I was going.
Philadelphia is ahead because 3 years ago we were like, process, here we go. But now they're ahead. They've decided Markelle Fultz out. We don't need you anymore. We're not going to deal with that. You didn't give us what we're looking for, even though we took you number 1 overall. They've decided to move on from that. Now they are one of the favorites in the East.
But Jay, don't you feel like this is where I was getting, Key? Also, you have I don't want to say easier, but to build your foundation of what you are, that's easier to do. To take that step now from there to championship medal, that's the harder move to make because it's such a delicate thing. If I remove this guy, how does it affect? Everybody kept blaming Kyrie for the chemistry issues. The chemistry issues never went away. You don't have that one leader. What are you missing from this team that's keeping it from taking that next step? And can Danny Ainge get it?
I said this before. I said I understand that Kyrie says a lot of things, and people can take that and turn it into different narratives about distractions. But I said, look, it's a job also of Brad Stevens. He's brilliant at X's and O's. But the best coaches in the game of basketball in the league, you know this, and the same with the NFL, they manage personalities.
Yes.
They manage personalities. And that's always been the question I've had for Brad.
But
how does he manage? Because now, what's the personality of this team? Who are they? Right? Is that Kemba Walker? Is that Jason Tatum? And sometimes it looks like guys check out. Like, that has to fall on the head coach. And it started a couple years ago with Kyrie.
Star player that sets the standard.
But let me ask you this, though, Jay and Allen. Brad Stevens manages personalities.
He tries
But is it really him or is it Danny Ainge for whatever reason? Because it seems like everybody has a tiff with Danny Ainge that leaves Boston. But it's always Danny Ainge, it seems like.
I know, I hear you. But look, if you got Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kemba Walker on the floor with young talent, I mean, that team needs to be way better than what they are right now.
You know what?
Way better than
Criticism
what
of
they are
Danny
right
Ainge
now.
is that he did not do a good job replenishing that bench. That bench is
Agreed.
they're not a deep
Just
team,
seemed-
and
it
that's
just-
cost them throughout.
That's why he tried to make the move to get Evan Fournier and
COVID
things
But
like
it just
Yeah.
seemed like Danny Ainge is always the butting the head, not Brad Stevens.
That
That's
is
it
Straight
just seems
Talk.
like.
Brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. No contract, no compromise. Just getting started here. That's that's a hot topic, obviously in Boston and throughout the NBA. Keep an eye on that game certainly tonight. But we move on now from the era of diva wide receivers
Here y'all go, man.
to the era
Stop,
of
man.
diva quarterbacks. That is next. KJZ, ESPN Radio, and